back to Remotely Speaking Up. We are back with episode 9, and in this episode, we are welcoming Catarina Rivera. Catarina, am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes, you're saying it perfectly. For English speakers, for Spanish speakers, I say Catarina Rivera.
I'll take that as Catarina Rivera. Is that the Spanish? Yes. Good. I'm proud of myself. Yes, we are here with Catarina this week to speak about disability in the remote workspace. And Catarina has a very thriving Instagram account called Blindish Latina. And Catarina does a lot of work in the space of helping organizations become more inclusive and accessible for persons with disabilities. So Catarina is going to talk us through this a bit more. And Catarina, just welcome to the show, and I will kick it over to you right away. So do you want to tell us a little bit about Blindish Latina? Where did that name come from, and what's the mission behind Blindish Latina?
Well, thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to share more about what I do and my story, and this topic is super important. So I chose the name Blindish Latina to make it super clear about my intersectional identities, that here you have Blindish, that's the disabled part of me, and you have Latina, that's my identity as well. So I think that when we focus on intersectionality and multiple identities, it's really powerful for people. Having my name has allowed people to connect with me that didn't see themselves necessarily online. And I think that's really important. That's also one of the reasons that I started doing what I do, because I didn't see a lot of representation of Latinidad within disability. So I became the person that which wanted to share my story so that other people could also see that we exist, we're here. There are lots of disabled Latinos. The other thing about my name that's I wanted to communicate is the blindish part of it. I am legally blind. I can use the word blind, but the outside world doesn't understand often that blindness is a spectrum and that you can have remaining usable vision and use a white cane, for example, and your blindness is valid. Like that is still valid. Only I think about 11% of people who are blind have total blindness. There's a lot of confusion around this. So I put blindish to kind of communicate that to the non-disabled community who really doesn't understand that, hey, there's something more to understand about blindness. And there is a way to be blindish. So it kind of just communicates a little bit of that message and plays around with language. So I have loved being out here as Blindish Latina. The mission behind what I do is to provide representation and address and smash stigmas about disability. Here I am, a disabled, professional, educated woman who is Latina. And many times people, I think, have an idea about disabled people that maybe we're not educated or we don't exist in mainstream society, that we exist somewhere else. So that's one of the reasons I talk about my educational background and the fact that I have 2 graduate degrees to really emphasize that message that I'm in the same spaces that you are, that I am educated, and this is a person that is disabled too. So if they have stigmas or ideas about the disability community, that can also kind of poke a hole in that. And so it's very important to me to address disability stigma and to create an impact on the workplace and our society, because I've been on my own journey. I've now become a very public advocate. I was very, very strong in my self-advocacy, speaking up for myself in different situations and using my voice. And I reached a certain point where that wasn't enough for me. I didn't want to make situations better for just me. I wanted to make them better for others like me and more people. So creating Blindish Latina allowed me to use my voice to make a bigger impact.
Yeah. just listening to you talk, I mean, I remember, well, we met last year, and there were so many things that I learned from your account and from your experience that when I actually reflected on them, I thought of a lot of the mistakes that I made in the same space. And when I speak with persons with disabilities and how I interact with them. And a lot of the things you said, you smashed stigmas, a lot of the stigmas that you smashed, I held myself, and I felt a bit ignorant when I realized, but at the same time, I was grateful to actually be able to start to understand them, because there were things that I never thought anything was wrong with. Like, I remember one of your videos, for example, you said, never touch a blind person. And I remember when we first met, that's the first thing I did to get your attention. So just those things, I think you're doing a fantastic job in just raising the awareness that actually how we may go about this interacting with disabled persons is not necessarily in their best interests, especially what you say in terms of being ignored as well, disabled persons being ignored in the mainstream space. So can you tell us a little bit more about your own disability?
Yes, I just want to thank you for being vulnerable in this space and owning up to the fact that you did have these stigmas within yourself, and that you were able to acknowledge them and make a change based on what you were learning from me. So that Definitely is an amazing thing. So yes, I'm glad to be having that impact on someone like you. Yeah. A little bit more about my disability. So I was born hard of hearing, and my vision loss did not become apparent until I was a teenager. So when I was 3 or 4 years old and my family found out that I was hard of hearing, I was fitted for hearing aids. I received speech therapy, lots of services, and I went throughout my whole childhood and schooling as a person who was hard of hearing. We never knew why I had any issues with my hearing until I was diagnosed with my vision loss at 17 years old. This diagnosis is called Usher syndrome. And Usher syndrome is the most common genetic cause of combined deafness and blindness. There are about 400,000 people worldwide who have Usher syndrome. The type of Usher syndrome that I have is Usher syndrome type 2. It basically means that my hearing will remain more or less stable compared to where it is now. My vision will continue to decline over time. And the way that I lose my vision is that I lose all of my peripheral. Like right now, I do not have any peripheral vision, but I have some central vision that remains strong. So that's a little bit about like the diagnosis. Yeah. How does it affect my life? You know, I have a very narrow visual field. I use a white cane as a mobility aid. It's super helpful to my independence, to my confidence, navigating. I have night blindness, so I see better during the day than at night. I have some depth perception issues, so approaching a staircase, if all the stairs are the same color, that'll be challenging to navigate. And I also have some trouble telling certain colors apart, so brown and black, or just colors that look very similar. So that's a little bit more about my disability.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. I learned something. I remember you had shared a bit with me previously as well. I like how you shared the different examples, because you're very much right in terms of when we think of blindness or when we think of a disability, we just think about it as one thing. We don't think about those little nuances and those little examples you gave with the stairs and peripheral vision and night vision and so forth. So thank you for sharing that. So like as the world has moved into this online working space, I imagine you yourself as well have been working online during the pandemic and so forth. Has that been particularly challenging for you? And can you tell us some of the challenges you faced in working in that online space?
This is a really important question. As we all know, the world changed practically overnight to remote work, to virtual work, virtual events. And this really did raise a lot of issues. One challenge that I have experienced very frequently is the lack of access to closed captions in virtual events and virtual meetings. If I'm meeting with somebody one-on-one, I have to ask several questions and do a lot of extra work. So if they say Zoom, I have to ask, does your Zoom have closed captions? And earlier, maybe last year or just earlier in the pandemic, Zoom didn't even have a plan for bringing in closed captions into its product. Now, I don't exactly remember when Zoom was formed as a company, but I think it was many years ago. And it's really a testament to how much accessibility is not prioritized, that it's taken them this long to put in closed captioning to their platform, because it's actually always been an access problem for the hard of hearing, especially, but also for other groups who benefit from closed captions. But because everybody was now relying on Zoom and using it as their preferred platform, it really became a central target for advocacy from the disability community, because these meetings were just not accessible, and a lot of event organizers also use Zoom. So it's very frustrating to be in a meeting and not understand what's going on and not be able to participate. You don't get to contribute your full talent. So there's been a lot of work to advocate for accessibility of online meetings and events. And this has happened for me in many situations. One-on-one meetings, events that I want to attend, emailing the organizers, asking a question like, are you going to have closed captions? And this has become a huge issue for me. I also want to see online videos, closed captions, things on social media, on websites. I think that many places lag behind, and we need to see that. So I pretty much won't watch a video if it's not closed captions. One of the things I love to emphasize about captions is that they work for so many people, and they actually benefit a lot of people. People, many times they think, oh, closed captions are just for the deaf and hard of hearing. Well, actually, closed captions benefit English language learners as well. Captions are helpful for people with auditory processing disorders as well. And anybody who is even a bit tired that day. The captions allow you to read and have the information in two ways. You have audio and you have the visual component. So it actually increases comprehension for everyone. When you look at marketing and social media, I believe that 80% of people prefer to watch videos with closed captions, and they will be more likely to finish them. So I think it's just a very smart business strategy. And that's one of the things that I think people don't really understand about accessibility, that it's not a special thing you're doing for a small group of people. That's a big myth that we have to bust, because disabled individuals are not a small group of people. We're actually over 1 billion people worldwide. And in the United States, 1 in 4 adults is currently disabled.
You're so right about that, you know, Katarina. I've heard a lot of companies now come to that realization of the entire talent pool that they're missing out by neglecting the persons with disabilities and the access that that requires. Because often in the past, when you speak about disability, where you speak about accommodating disabled persons, sometimes it's spoken of as an inconvenience. And I don't realize how, I don't think companies realize actually that a lot of the key talent, a lot of the skills and expertise that they're looking for in creative vision can be found within the disabled community. So I think you're very much right in really pushing for companies to be more accessible and to think about these things, especially, as you said, pointing out the amount of persons that have disabilities. And one of the things that we know is that a lot of persons with disabilities, that may not always be obvious. So we may assume, we're assuming a lot where when we don't make that sort of stretch, or when we don't think of accessibility and inclusion for the disabled community. So I really like that you shared that. So what can companies do then? You mentioned in terms of the closed captions. What else can companies do to make, let's say, online work, but also their companies in general, whether that's how you interact with them outside of those virtual meetings? What can they do to make the remote workspace and just your working space more inclusive and accessible?
It's very important. And I think that any company that works on accessibility and inclusion is going to be a better place to work for all of their employees. So let's just put that first. Yeah. If you want to be a good place to work, you should be focusing on inclusion and accessibility. Some of the tangible things that companies can do is use closed captions on all of their meetings and make it the default that there shouldn't be a meeting or event held that doesn't have closed captions enabled. You also want to make sure they're good quality captions. For companies that use Microsoft, you're in luck because Microsoft Teams has this built-in automatic closed captioning. And I find the quality of the captions to be very good. Google Meet also has automatic closed captions that are available to every user. And what's great about these platforms is that nobody has to set it up. The meeting organizer does not have to set it up. It's already built in. Any user can turn it on or off for themselves, and no one else will know that they have captions enabled on their screen. So it really does provide that accessibility and I think a sense of comfort for participants. Another way to be accessible that's very small, it can seem small, but actually will have a big impact on your workforce, is to use the raise hand feature and maximize the use of the chat box. Not everybody feels comfortable to jump in and vocalize their participation. So when companies have a meeting and they say, oh, jump in, or whoever wants to respond can talk. A lot of times what you then have is a space for the loudest and most privileged voices to thrive. And you're not allowing everybody an equitable space for participation. For me, as a hard of hearing person, I am very afraid of speaking over someone else, because it happens to me multiple times where I start speaking and on a kind of a delay, I realize that there is sound coming from somebody else. And I didn't mean to speak over them. I just didn't hear them when I started speaking. And that can be interpreted negatively. So as a person who's hard of hearing, you kind of, if you want to look around, like totally make sure that people are not speaking. And it can feel very stressful about just entering a conversation in that way. So the raising hands and having someone facilitating and bringing in different voices and uplifting things from the chat is much more welcoming and comfortable for people. And that's an inclusive strategy that I promote. Yeah. When you talk about your work environment as a whole, you want to equip your managers to provide an inclusive work environment, to provide an inclusive management style. And that requires training and a mindset that comes not just by articulating some values. When you have values at a company, maybe they sound wonderful, but you have to operationalize them and you have to provide the support for everybody to carry out observable behaviors that relate to your values. Like, how do your values show up in your culture? If you haven't done that work to make them translate your values into those observable behaviors, there is a real challenge as far as making your values the way your culture operates. You actually haven't put them into your culture. Another small tip actually is to create agendas for meetings, for all meetings. Creating agendas, that's an inclusive strategy. It allows people who perhaps are introverted or need more time to process to have access to the meeting material ahead of time. They can start to formulate ideas. People who are hard of hearing can feel more supported during a meeting because they can see what's happening. They have more context for the conversation. People who maybe are feeling like they're not being heard in a meeting, when they get an agenda, I think it really just provides that support. It also forces the manager to think about, how is this meeting going to go? How am I going to use everyone's time wisely?
Yeah.
So the last thing that I will say, sorry, Michelle,
no,
one more thing.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, when we're talking about the workforce and the workplace, we need to focus on ableism and addressing ableism, because everybody has it. Everyone's been influenced by society. Everyone's gotten this message that disability is a bad thing to talk about, and it's not. And it's not a bad thing to have. My disability is just a part of me. It's not something I suffer from. It's not something I overcome or that I succeed in spite of or despite my disability. It's a part of me. I'm proud of it. And when we focus on the workplace, ableism influences people's attitudes, behaviors, influences processes. So we have to know what it is, address it, and take steps to dismantle ableism. There are steps that managers and leaders can take, that executive leadership can take, and even disabled employees can take steps to address ableism. However, the burden should not be on your disabled employees to lead this charge. It requires all of us. Yeah. One of the things that's so important to work on is language around disability and avoiding microaggressions. Because when disabled employees experience microaggressions, it has a big impact on their well-being, on their sense of belonging in your company, and their contributions. So the microaggressions that people need to be aware of, I think, are often words that they use without even thinking about, or they meant well, but nobody told them otherwise. And so we have a real responsibility to own our language and be accountable for our language and to make those changes. I actually have an article that I can share with your listeners about addressing ableism in the workplace, and I provide concrete strategies.
You're so right, and I can say that I'm a reforming ableist, because I've learned so much from your page. I've learned so much from the work that you're doing, and I absolutely love how you're bringing a lot of awareness to this. I'll give you another example. Last week, I was on a city break last weekend with some friends. And I don't know how we got to the topic of it, but I raised your work and what you were doing. I said, I have a friend who has this account called Blindish Latina, and this is the work that she's doing. And I asked in the vehicle, I said, has anyone ever heard of the term ableism? No one had heard of that term before. So I was like, I wonder if this is more common than I think. But the thing about it is, before your account and before the work that you were doing, I myself had never even heard the phrase as well. And through a lot of what you've done and then going and research myself, now I'm learning about ableism, what it means to be ableist. And as you said, those microaggressions and kind of recognizing the things that have been done in the past and how you actually change them. So I do like that you have shared with us a lot of strategies and kind of also your perspective and giving us a kind of mirror, holding a mirror up to different people and saying, hey, you really got to think about how you address people and how you include people and the type of language that you're using. So I think what Blindish Latina is doing, I think the work that you're doing is absolutely powerful, absolutely necessary in this space. So I would love for you to tell us a bit more about what is the future of Blindish Latina.
Well, thank you. I'm just getting so much stories on how, because we haven't talked in a while, so I didn't know. I'm so excited to hear that you're doing research on ableism, that you're bringing up the word and talking about the fact that people are not as aware of it. It is another harmful ism, but we don't necessarily see enough attention paid to it. And this really needs to change. So thank you for engaging.
Definitely.
So what is Blindish Latina working on? Blindish Latina as a business is working with clients to make sure that companies are prioritizing disability within their diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. A lot of companies are focused on DEI work, and for some reason, they don't center disability as a critical part of that work. So a lot of what I do is speaking about this at conferences, working with clients, and really raising the need for the imperative, actually, to focus on disability and the benefits that that can bring.
Yeah.
I recently published an ebook on 32 tools for hearing accessibility. Wow. It's a really great book for people with hearing disabilities and their allies. It provides a guide to all these tools that you can use in your life. And that is something that we put out for the community. I also recently started a brand partnership, and I'm looking forward to getting more brand partnerships, because not only do I want to work with companies and clients to focus on their communities, I also see the power of what I'm doing with my Stigma Smash Up community on Instagram with Blindish Latina. And I want to bring brands in to connect to the message and keep pushing what we are seeing online. So I'm excited about everything that is coming. I see a lot of areas for impact. Another way that I'm impacting people is I created a workshop with a user experience designer named Rabia Wajiha, and it focuses on accessibility and user experience design. She shared a story with me that she only received 1 hour of training in accessibility in her whole bootcamp experience, only 1 hour. And she felt that many designers were in the same boat, in the same situation. So we created this workshop to provide a foundation to designers in accessibility and the strategies and tools that they can use. And I provide my lived experience as part of that. We see a potential with this because user experience designers are creating all the worlds in which we interact and live. They're creating the apps, they're creating the social media platforms of tomorrow, and we need these spaces to be accessible.
Yeah, wow. You have a full plate there, and I wish you all the best of luck with it. You're doing some really great work. Katerina, thank you. You've shared so much with us in this episode. Thank you for all of the inspiring work that you're doing. Thank you for the education that you're sharing and just being really vulnerable to share your own lived experience. And even discussing that in the online space, you raise a lot of things that we take for granted and people don't think about. So I know our audiences will take away a lot from what you said today. We're just about to wrap up. So would you like to share your funniest work story with us?
So when you told me I would be answering this question, I didn't want to share an embarrassing moment, because I do have those. I have situations, and oftentimes my disability comes into play. I didn't see something, but I will share that recently I was cleaning out my email inbox because I'm always at the full mark. It's completely full. And I came across an old email between me and my former dance school. So I was a teacher, an elementary school teacher in the Bronx, and I completely forgot about this story. I was taking salsa dance lessons in Midtown, New York, and I had asked my instructor to come to my classroom and let my students interview him. And the school had said yes, everything was set. And I remember the excitement of that, where my classroom was my space. I could create this environment for my students to get exposed to new ideas. And it was a really nice memory to call up, because I remember they were third graders and my classroom was a bilingual classroom. And here he was, a Latino male dance instructor, and he came in. They had so much fun interviewing him. They learned a lot, and it was really fun exchange. I also remembered that I invited my brother when he came back from India to come to my classroom and do a presentation on India.
Yeah.
And he brought like, I don't know, he brought different clothes, jewelry, and he was telling them all about it.
Yeah.
And they were so interested. And so that was just like a fun memory to think about how anybody can really be fascinating to young people.
Wow, it sounds like your classroom was a revolving door. It sounds like good fun.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Katerina. And thank you for joining us. To our audiences, thank you for another week. This has been another week of Remotely Speaking Up. And we were joined by Katarina Rivera, who shared with us how we can make the remote workspace more accessible and inclusive for persons with disabilities. Katerina even went beyond that. She shared how we can make workspaces in general more inclusive. So thank you so much, Katerina, for joining us. Thank you to our audiences. And this has been another episode of Remotely Speaking Up. Take care.